Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky. Today we're going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. Today we're going to be looking at one of the greatest French artists of all time, Jacques-Louis David. Jacques-Louis David is... I gotta think, if you were to make a movie about an artist, you could be hard-pressed to find an artist who led as dramatic and influential of a life as Jacques-Louis David. We're going to talk about his biography here. It's absolutely fascinating. I've been a huge fan of his art for a long time. I wrote part of my graduate master's degree thesis on him and some of the artists that were his pupils. So, and this is one of my favorite works of his. It's always really stood out for me because it's a famous unfinished painting. We'll talk about what it was going to be. It was a part of a much larger painting, why it was never finished. This is the unfinished portrait of General Bonaparte. This is before Napoleon became Emperor of France, a self-declared Emperor of France. It's a fascinating painting for all sorts of reasons. I'll let you know that in order to help you get this painting started, I've created an outline, which you're welcome to use. It's free, and I'll show you where to download it in a second. I'll also let you know, if you're really interested, there's another painting that I've put in the same folder that I'll show you here in a moment. This is another famous painting by Jacques-Louis David, Napoleon crossing the Alps. And here's an outline I did of it as well. So if you wanted to do this one instead, it's a much more complicated painting. So I'll show you where to find these images. So in the video description below, you're going to see a link to a folder for the Master Study series. And there are a lot of files in this folder because these are all paintings we've done. And in some of these folders, there's multiple paintings in here. So you'll see in here we've got 6 files. There's the 2 original paintings in 2 versions of the outline, a JPEG and a PDF. So you can download those files onto your computer and print them out. I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. I've got a pre-recorded little bit here to show you. And after you're done, I want you to take a photograph of what you've created, whether it's the greatest painting you've ever made or not, because once a month I go through all of the files that are here on the Facebook group, organize them, and give people feedback. And often people find that's the most helpful part of these lessons, is having someone like myself, who's a professional teacher, kind of go through the artwork and show you how it could be improved. So it's an awesome, super supportive community, and people are also working on their own things. Here's Eleanor. She's been doing a few of the Pied Mondrian paintings. This is beyond where we went in our class when we looked at Pied Mondrian. But it makes me super excited to see her continuing her interest in this great artist. And I also did the Christmas tree painting we did a few weeks ago. That's great. Wow, she's been busy. Look at all these things she's been uploading. Awesome. Well done, Eleanor. Anyway, there's lots of people on there at various different points of their creative journey. So join up. It's free. Doesn't cost you a penny, except maybe a little bit of time, and what a better way to spend your time than making art. So before we get into the painting and everything, there's a bunch of links. We'll talk about the biography of this artist, but I want to get this whole painting started. So let me play for you this video, and I'm going to talk over top of it as it plays here. So you're going to see I printed out the outline on just a regular photocopy piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, and I'm going to transfer it onto a 9 by 12 sized canvas board. Right, you can buy the exact ones on canvas boards in the video description below. You can also get them at your local art supply store, Michael's, Walmart, all those kind of places sell them. Although the ones that I've been using, I think, work better. They're a little bit higher quality, slightly more expensive, $2 instead of $1. And then I'm going to use some carbon transfer paper here. You can use graphite transfer paper. They both do the exact same thing. I slide it underneath the canvas, the image there between the canvas and the photocopy, and then I'm going to trace over these lines. It's pretty self-explanatory how tracing works, so right, you lift it up. You want to double check and make sure that all the lines are actually there before you move on. And once you've done that, you have your image here. Why am I having a hard time? Okay. So you can keep this, you could recycle it, you can use it to do a second version of the painting if you should want or need to. This one doesn't quite work out the way you expected it to. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little bit of a warm yellow wash over top of this painting. Looks like the spam bots are already hitting the live stream. So I'm going to put my warm yellow down here. I do this on every painting I make these days. In lieu of putting down a kind of a rusty brown color. So instead of spending the first few minutes mixing a color, I can just launch right in by putting this warm yellow onto the surface. Now we'll look at the painting, and there's various different documentations of this canvas that we'll look at where the color is quite different image to image. So which one do we want to try to recreate? That's sort of the question that I ask myself almost every episode, because a painting might look very different the way that it's documented versus the way it actually appears in person. Often a lot of older artworks, Renaissance artworks, look very different in person because they were often painted in either daylight or by candlelight, and were never there was no concept of big bright lights in most that we see in rooms and museums these days. So they were almost kind of lit originally in a kind of like a movie theater lighting, like in a dark room, and you'd walk in and you might spend an hour or two with one painting looking at it, only for it to slowly unveil itself to you or reveal its details to you. And we don't do that anymore. Now we're always in a rush and a hurry, and spending more than 10 seconds looking at a painting now is seen as loitering, right? Move along, nothing to see here, keep on going. Famous paintings, lots of them in the museum, keep going. Nice surface. So I'm going to apply another color over top of this, to a little bit more of a cream white color, to give it the look of the mostly raw canvas. But we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm just going to put this painting to the side. We'll let it dry. While it's drying, we'll talk a little bit about who Jacques-Louis David was and why I'm so fascinated by him, and why I think you should be as well. And we could literally talk for hours about his biography. It is absolutely fascinating. He was one of those persons that intersected with all of the... Oops, I put my cool red in the warm red area, which is going to be a little bit confusing. That's why I can move these around. Oh. I guess I could turn the sound off of our baby monitor as well, right? Okay. I'll put some white in the center here. Okay, so I got my paints on here. I'm not sure how much of each of these colors I'll actually end up using by the end of the episode, but well, you never know. You never know. Okay. So just put this back here. Now let's take a look at the biography of this great artist. Okay, well actually maybe even before I do that, I just thought I would just show you, here's a few different images that are on the web of this painting. Oh. No, I want, you can see all the different documentation. I wanted to see this one. Anyway, it's not letting me scroll through both of them, but here's one version, here's another version that's a little bit more bluey. And this is what the painting looks like in a frame at the Louvre Museum. And you can see it's 81 by 65 centimeters, which is, you know what, 2 feet or so. So it's maybe a little bit bigger, probably like 30 by 40 or something inches, right? So it's not a big painting, but it was part of a larger painting. Now, I don't know exactly how big it was. I was trying to do some research on it today, and I'm sure it's in some books at the library, but I wasn't able to find anything online. But the original, let me see. Do I want to tell you the story of this paint? Let's go into the biography of the artist, and then we'll kind of come back, and we'll talk about the painting. Okay, so Jacques-Louis David, born in 1748 and dies at the age of 77 in 1825, and was painting right up until the very, very end. Although, well, we'll talk about the end at the end, right? So this guy, it's hard to imagine someone living a more dramatic life. Jacques-Louis David seemed to always be in the center of the social life, the political life of France during the time leading up to the French Revolution, during the French Revolution, absolutely, and then even afterwards. He was this character that I feel like would have been very much at home in the Game of Thrones. If you've ever seen that HBO show, Game of Thrones, he reminded me a lot of Peter Baelish. I think it was his name, Littlefinger or something. Let me see. If you recall Game of Thrones, this is the character who was always at the center of some sort of backstabbing plot. And I even think Jacques-Louis David sort of resembles this actor a little bit. If I was to cast an actor to play Jacques-Louis David in a biography, I would probably choose this artist because, or choose this actor, maybe because his portrayal of this real sleazy character in Game of Thrones was so powerful. But Jacques-Louis David was very similar. He was a social climber. He was always jumping from one side of the political aisle to the other, which in revolutionary France meant the the difference between life and death, right? So he's raised in a fairly well-to-do family. His father dies in a duel, which is, it's hard to believe that that kind of thing ever happened at one time, but his father dies in a duel, and his mother sends him to essentially be raised with his uncles. And his uncles were architects, and there was a certain amount of pressure for Jacques-Louis David to also become an architect, but he preferred drawing. He had, let's say in here anywhere, he had like a tumor on his face, and then later quite a severe scar that he was quite self-conscious about, and made it difficult for him to talk. So he was a little bit introverted, at least in his youth, and spent a lot of his youth drawing. And because of his family's connection, being relatively well off and being interested in the arts, he was taught painting. One of his teachers was François Boucher, who was one of the main artists, the French artists, during what is known as the Rococo period. And the Rococo, it's worth just taking a quick little second. The Rococo was, if we go to like, we have the Renaissance period, right, which is Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and then that is followed by the Baroque period. And the Baroque period is like the Renaissance on steroids. We have this, everything's getting louder and bigger and more colorful, more detailed in every little place. And then the Rococo is the movement that follows the Baroque, and I'm really simplifying, skipping over a lot of minor things, but the Rococo is considered to be this sort of the time where art is at its most frivolous, its most just sort of purely joyous, assuming you were in the upper classes, right? If you were a king or a queen, the Rococo was the fantastic time, right? It's sort of seen as this time where, of a relative amount of peace, and money is just being spent lavishly on all these great state dinners. The Rococo period coincides with Marie Antoinette and King Louis the 15th and 16th. So this, when you hear of like Marie Antoinette's famous quote, even though she never said it, "Let them eat cake," kind of gives you an idea what the Rococo period is like. And we see, these types of paintings that Boucher did of, everyone is sort of happy. They're wandering through forests, right? Here's an early painting by Jacques-Louis David, where we have, we have little cupids and flowers and women walking through these pastoral scenes and little animals, and it's a very kind of hopeful time. It's often sort of critiqued as sort of the height of excess, right? And when people think of the end of a major civilization, like people will talk about like the time that we're in right now is like a contemporary kind of Rococo, right before the fall of Western civilization kind of thing, right? Where excess is taken to its natural limits before the revolution comes and sweeps all of that away. And that's exactly what happens in France. The Rococo is also, is seen by the struggling lower classes, the poor, as being totally out of touch with the everyday lives of the working poor, the masses that did all of the work so that all of these wealthy people could leave these lives of joy and frivolity, right? And it's creating this the perfect situation, like the powder keg, which will explode into the French Revolution just a few years later. But anyway, Boucher is sort of seen as one of the most important artists of the Rococo period. And at this time, David is getting more and more skilled. There's this sort of major award that is awarded to an art student every year, and it's called the Prix de Rome, which I think it still exists today in some form. I don't know if it's quite like this, but at the time it was an award that would actually send an artist to Rome to go make art. And yeah, maybe it says to go look at the Italian Renaissance masters at first hand. And David becomes obsessed with trying to win this award. And he wants to get out of the country. He wants to go see these great works of art. And he's turned down 4 times. Maybe it's the 4th time he finally wins this award. But he becomes... The fact that he's rejected over and over and over again, while he's getting better and better and better, and when he feels he justly deserves this award, that becomes very... it becomes very significant later, because when David finally comes into power, because he assumes a certain amount of political power during the French Revolution, and he's taking names, and the names on that list are people who later lose their heads in the guillotine. No joke. This guy is, if there was ever an artist who held a grudge, whose side you did not want to get, bad side you did not want to get onto, it was Jacques-Louis David. So he's, all of this time, rejection after rejection after rejection. When he finally is in power, when his good buddy Robespierre comes into power, Jacques-Louis David shows up with this list and says, these are the people that screwed me over. They're rounded up and their heads are chopped off, right? So that is I mean, I'm sure a lot of us probably have these perverse desires to see the people that have wronged us suffer some level of consequences. Jacques-Louis David was certainly someone who was able to enact those terrible fantasies. Eventually, he does win that award. He goes to Rome, and he makes a number... He basically fills up, I think it's like 15 or 20 sketchbooks full of drawings. And he literally uses all of the drawings and the sketches that he made looking at the famous paintings by Leonardo in the Sistine Chapel, the paintings by Leonardo in the Vatican Museum, and the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, and the Raphael paintings, all of the great artworks that are in the Vatican collections. And he fills up these sketchbooks, and he returns to these sketches, the stack of drawings that he makes over that couple of years, he uses all of that work, which is really kind of stunning. I haven't really heard of another artist doing something similar throughout history. At the same time, the ruins of Pompeii are excavated, and that's the big sensation around Europe at the time, was the rediscovery of these. I've been to Pompeii, and I've walked the streets of Pompeii. It would have looked very different when it was newly uncovered, but you could imagine all of a sudden people who are already interested in classical art seeing all of these original tiled artworks and sculptures being uncovered from the dirt, and just being absolutely shocked and in awe. They feel like they were, because they're perfectly preserved, they feel like they were painted just yesterday, even though they were over 1,000 years old at the time. So what else can we talk about here? Again, he finally sort of is admitted into the academy and is exhibiting in the salon, but he's still dealing with certain people who are are sort of frustrating his attempt to his ambitious social climbing, and he believes that he not only deserves to be admitted to the academy, but he should be in charge of the academy. He should be the most important person. And all these people are like, dude, you just got in. Like, chill a little bit, right? Just wait your turn, and you'll if you keep on making great paintings, all of the success that you desire will come to you. Jacques-Louis David is a very impatient person, and he, again, is keeping names, and some of these people that he felt mistreated him later on perish in what becomes known as the Reign of Terror. We'll look at some of his paintings here in a moment. Okay, so one of his best friends is Robespierre. And Maximilien Robespierre, if you know anything about the French Revolution, was really one of the most feared persons in French history. I don't know who you would compare him to, but he was basically, his whole thing was to go around, round up, because the French Revolution, I don't want to go into a whole detail of what the whole French Revolution was, but essentially you have the King of France is sent from God. He's the son. Well, eventually the Sun King is Louis the 16th, or no, they're sent from God to rule over the people, right? And there's a series of small uprisings. They're slowly building, and the king is sort of forced to concede a certain amount of power, and France is starting to become a republic where you have, in the same sort of way, I guess you could see like a constitutional monarchy where, like England is today, where the Queen has certain powers, and she could dissolve Parliament if she wanted, but it would cause a crisis. And so that similar sort of thing is happening in France, in that the king is losing more and more power. These, they're not just anybody. The people that are forming this government are mostly all very wealthy landowners, and they're taking more and more power. And there's these sort of, and there's not just one group of people and they all agree on everything. There's multiple groups that are all fighting back and forth for the power, until eventually the king tries to escape. He's been communicating with the king of Austria, who is sort of their enemy, because the kings are all like, okay, if the French kill their king, what are our people going to do we don't want anybody to get an idea that we should start executing kings and queens around here, because that's not good for kings and queens in other countries, right? So even though they might be enemies, they think like, yeah, okay, well, we better let's see if we can help out this guy, because it wouldn't bode well for us if this revolutionary spirit spills out of France, right? So Louis is arrested. He's brought back to France. His wife, Marie Antoinette, and they're eventually beheaded. Jacques-Louis David is there. I don't know if he makes drawings. I think there might be an image of it somewhere in here. So here's Marie Antoinette on her way to the guillotine. Here's a sketch by Jacques-Louis David. And Jacques-Louis David signs a document authorizing the execution of the king and the queen, right? So his name is on a paper saying, I support the execution of the king. When the king and queen are executed, Jacques-Louis David's wife, and I think he had 4 daughters, his wife divorces him. His wife was a royalist, was supportive of the king. She had vague kind of royal blood, so she was not impressed that her husband had supported the execution of the king. So you could, that's quite the disagreement between a husband and wife. right? So she divorces him. They later on, many years later, David finds himself on the wrong side of this revolution because it flip-flops all back and forth, and David is able to tap dance for a while between all the different factions until he himself is later arrested and thrown in jail for on and off for a period of about a year. His ex-wife writes him letters of support, helps get him out of jail, and they are married again. He's pretty darn lucky that she stood by him. What are there a few things here? I mean, there's so much. I've been watching movies and reading books over the past few weeks, getting ready for today's episode. There's just so much I want to mention here. You may have seen, this is a very famous Jacques-Louis David painting, arguably maybe his most famous painting, besides maybe Napoleon crossing the Alps. But this is the death of Marat, and Marat was a famous revolutionary who was murdered while he was in this bathtub, and Marat had some type of skin condition. We're still not exactly sure what it was, but he would lay in this bathtub all day long, every day, sleep in this tub in order to help alleviate this like intense itching condition that he had. And I can't remember the exact story, but this woman was able to get into the room and passed him a note. I think he thought that she was a friend of the revolution. She ends up killing him, and David was a friend of Marat, and so David makes this painting in honor of his dead friend, and this becomes a very important painting for the revolution. Interestingly enough, this woman Charlotte Corday, who was the one that kills Marat, later on it flips where she becomes a heroic figure, and Marat himself becomes seen as this as a traitor to the cause, or so it would have been a very scary time, the French Revolution. Like, everyone is, the Reign of Terror is a pretty good description of what was happening, and even which continued after Robespierre himself is arrested and executed, right? And so it didn't just end when, there was a whole other kind of a part 2 to the Reign of Terror that came on. After this happens, after the French Revolution sort of collapses on itself, the monarchy is sort of reborn or reinstalled, and then we have Napoleon is this young military general who's rising up through the ranks, who's going around Europe conquering all of these different small countries, city-states and things, and eventually defeats Austria in this famous battle, the Battle of Rivoli, kind of in the Alps in northern Italy, which basically against the Austrian military. By defeating them, France essentially carves up most of Italy as part of their empire, and because of that, Napoleon becomes hugely famous, and there's a lot of anxiety back in the capital, like, okay, this guy is now the most popular person. Like, oh, we're up. It's needless to say, we'll skip over a whole bunch of politics here, but Napoleon eventually declares himself Emperor of France, and again, the kings and queens are pushed off to the side, and they run around in exile until Napoleon is defeated, and then Napoleon is exiled. Napoleon comes back. Napoleon is finally exiled again. That's a whole other story, but it is super interesting, all of the stories, and David is right there in the center of it. And I can't stress how much it reminds me of this character from Game of Thrones. Is always like, okay, who's in charge now? Who's about to be executed? Okay, I'm with you. Oh, Oh, you're everyone wants you dead now? Okay. Anybody need anybody to paint their portrait? I'm with you guys. Oh, you're about to be executed? Oh, right. And it's just like juggling allegiances here. Eventually, when Napoleon is finally sent to the to Elba to die, Jacques-Louis David goes on self-imposed exile. He goes to what is now Belgium, which was the once, you know, the part of the Netherlands, and he lives there for, I think, for the last like 10 years or so of his life, and eventually passes away. In that last 10 years of his life, he becomes much less political, because he's probably like, okay, I gotta like pump the brakes on all of this. I'm becoming an old man. There's only so much of this like flip-flopping I can do. And the last few decades of his life are the paintings that are much more less overtly political. Because one of the interesting things, oops, I don't know how that happened. One of the interesting things with Jacques-Louis David is he's very inspired by history painting, and history painting, as it might sound, is documenting or making paintings about famous historical battles, coronations, just various different historical incidents, and making paintings based upon them. And you know, prior to this, you might have people painting people in contemporary clothing. What Jacques-Louis David does is he takes these historical incidents and moments and dresses everybody up in kind of classical Greek and Roman clothing. So in a way to elevate, like, you could imagine someone, like, for instance, painting a painting of the you know, let's say the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol building, right? But instead of people being dressed up in camo and Donald Trump hats, everyone is dressed up in kind of Roman robes and tunics, and with swords and shields, as if it looked like it was taking place 2,000 years ago. So that's one of the trademarks of David's kind of the way he did his type of historical painting. That's not going to work. I thought this was. In fact, here's. So well, this is the Oath of the Tennis Court. I don't know if I can right. Other famous paintings. This is the coronation of Napoleon. This is a huge painting. I think this is in Versailles, or maybe it's the Louvre. So here's Napoleon putting the crown on his wife Josephine. He's already got the crown. Here's the Pope. Let's just kind of take a quick look at his art briefly here. We can see a lot of these early paintings follow the Rococo style that he was taught by his teachers like Boucher. And then as he becomes more interested in classical themes, we see a lot more of these allegorical historical paintings. I love this painting here. Here's his self-portrait. So one of the things that is really interesting, Jacques-Louis David starts to try to make history paintings about things that are happening literally right now, that are current events. And this big painting, The Oath of the Tennis Court, was intended to be this gigantic painting where all of the figures were life-size, a huge painting. And while he's painting it, certain people who had posed for him in the painting are arrested and executed. People who were few months ago who are heroes of the revolution are now traitors of the revolution. And you know, he's sort of like faced like, I don't know how I'm going to finish this painting, because now I've got to put somebody else in this person's place because this person's dead, and now, okay, now this person who was a villain is now a hero. Like, so eventually this painting is abandoned. I don't know where that painting is now. It's a huge painting that was left unfinished. Another really interesting thing that happens as David gets into power, as he's best friends with Robespierre and then later with Napoleon. Maybe not best friends, but well enough acquainted that he gets certain roles within these new governments. One of which is to basically plan various different parades and celebrations, and he ends up designing all of these costumes for people to wear in these different marches, and you could see his interest in these classical Roman and Greek robes, right? That this is how he designed, like what he thought people should be wearing in these ceremony. And these giant pageants that he puts on become you know, they're super popular. Hundreds of thousands of people are attending these things, and other people are looking around like, whoa, this guy, he's doing a good job, but man, we better stay on the right side of Jacques-Louis David, because, you know, this, if he's able to orchestrate these big celebrations, if we run afoul of this guy, he's also capable of organizing something not so positive as he had done, rounding up some of his enemies. So, let me see. I think this is the last painting that he makes. And what's interesting, as he's painting it, he's declaring to people, this is my last painting. When this painting is finished, I will officially retire. You know, kind of like you've heard of Quentin Tarantino saying, this is my last movie. As soon as this movie's done, I'm walking away. So this is, he does work on a few other small ones after this, but it is interesting that he made like a very public declaration that he was moving on from that painting, or from painting altogether, and quietly going into the sunset, which was probably a lot of people at the time are like, yeah, I'll see it, you know, I'll believe it when I see it. You're going to retire and just quietly go about... Yeah, we've heard that one a few times, and people paid with their lives for it. Anyway, let's think about how we're going to paint this painting. So the first thing I want to do is put on a colored ground here. And we looked at a few different versions of what this color could be. I don't know what... I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of make a whitish, yellowy kind of thing there. And so... where should we do this? I'm going to move that out of the way. Let's get... let me take a bit of warm red. Warm blue. I'm basically going to turn this into a brown. I'm just going to scoop it all. Okay. So let's go. And then I'm just going to wipe the majority of this out. Okay, let's take our white, put this in here, and I'm going to use some matte medium, just to make it a little bit thinner so that I don't completely use the yellow I applied. And also to make it a little bit transparent so that I can see all my pencil lines in here. I mean, that's not bad right there, actually. I was planning on putting more of this color in here, but maybe just a tad more. That's good. And you know what? I'm afraid I'm going to get kind of far in this painting on the background and run out of paint. So let's just make a bigger mixture. And if worse comes to worse, we can always, we'll have a little bit left over that we can, if we make any mistakes, we can use. So this is going to lighten the color up. So we'll just put a bit of that brown back in here. Ah, it was a lot more than I was hoping. Not bad. Okay. So let's take this color that we've just mixed up here, and I'm going to apply it over top of everything. I'm glad I made a little bit more of a mixture here because I'm I have a little bit left over, but not really as much more as I thought I would. Okay, so the original image, at least right now, just seems to have kind of disappeared. It's still there. I can see it, maybe not on camera so well, but that's cool. Ah, there's some kind of lump that keeps getting on the painting here. Okay, that's good. So let this dry for a moment. Okay. And then I'm just going to clean my table up. I always find it a little distracting when I have a lot of color that I don't necessarily want on the background here, just kind of invading my periphery. It doesn't have to be perfect. There we go, makes me feel better. Little bits of texture. So let's just blow dry this, and then we'll begin the actual painting of this painting. And you know, it appears to be a very simple painting, but you can spend as much time on it as you actually want. I mean, really, there's basically the face is the main part of it. So that's why getting a background that we're satisfied with, I think, is pretty important. Okay, so obviously it's a little bit, my color that I've chosen as my background is different from what we're seeing here, but remember that there were a few different versions of it, right, depending on the source of the image that we're reproducing. There's some that are really yellow, then there's some that are kind of blue and kind of a little bit more brown. I mean, so you take your pick as to which one that you want to base your painting off of. I think the color of the background is not irrelevant, but I think it gives a lot of opportunity for a little bit of play here, is what I would say. Okay, and remember, this is from a much larger painting. We're not even exactly sure how big of a painting it was, but essentially this composition, what we're looking at here, is the young General Napoleon who's clutching either, I'm not exactly sure whether it's in this hand or this hand, the peace treaty. I can't remember what the treaty is called, but the surrender of the Austrian army to Napoleon's French army in the defeat of the Battle of Rivoli, right, which essentially handed most of Italy over to France. And the reason why the painting is unfinished is that, you know, after this major victory, Napoleon has won this treaty, he becomes a hero, and he returns to Paris, and there's a big celebrations, and this is really one of the major incidents in Napoleon's life that leads him to be able to ascend to become the Emperor of France, the self-declared emperor. But within a short period of time, this treaty that had been agreed upon with the Austrian generals was torn up, and these countries go back to war. So David again is trying to make these history paintings about contemporary events without the benefit of 30, 40 years unfolding and being, okay, that's what we sort of agree on what's happened here, or this is my interpretation of what happened here, or what the people commissioning me to make this version of history say happened. He's trying to make it while it's happening. And so this big painting was supposed to be this celebratory thing of Napoleon crushing the Austrians. Whether there was going to be other military figures and landscapes and all that kind of stuff around there, I'm not exactly sure. But because the countries go back to war, that treaty is basically meaningless. And so this painting sort of serves no purpose anymore, right? So the painting is shelved indefinitely. Probably Napoleon's suggestion of being like, well, it doesn't make sense for me to pay you to finish this painting. Let's move on to something else. So the painting sits in storage for a while. In sort of consolation, Napoleon invites Jacques-Louis David, who's become quite a fan of, to come with him to Egypt, because they're going to go to Egypt on this expedition, essentially to loot the country of all of its great artifacts, from to go into the pyramids and pull out all of the mummies of the pharaohs and all that kind of stuff. And Jacques-Louis David, who, Napoleon I think is in his mid-20s at this point. Jacques-Louis David is probably would have been about 45 years old, so he's a little bit older. He's about my age, and he's probably thinking, I have seen a lot of stuff unfold in the last 10 years during this revolution. You know what? I'm going to stick in the capital here. I'm going to stay in Paris, because, yeah, you might be really powerful and famous right now, but who knows what's going to happen while you're gone. And if I'm there with you, who knows, maybe by the time we get back, they're going to chop our heads off. I'd rather be in the center of the power, being able to jump ship from whoever I need to. So he stays in Paris while another artist goes to Egypt with Napoleon, and from that venture, there's these very famous drawings and paintings of Napoleon next to the Sphinx in Egypt and the Great Pyramids and all that kind of stuff. But interestingly enough, that same artist who went with Napoleon is the artist that cuts down this large painting, which was probably people thinking like, well, it's garbage, let's throw it out. So that artist cuts down this the image and preserves it for posterity. So that is it Vernet? It's worth just a quick mention here. Dominique Vivant-Denon. Sorry. I think let me just take a quick second here. Doesn't show his. Vivant-Denon. I think I just want to check out Egypt. Right, so here's the. Here's a book collecting all of these drawings, right? You've probably even seen some of these images before, but didn't even realize who had actually created them. Right, here's Napoleon's soldiers with the Sphinx, which at the time was still buried under a lot of sand. It would have been an amazing experience to have been there. But I also, the more you understand a little bit of what was happening during that revolutionary period, the more you're like, probably was kind of smart of David to stay put after seeing all of his friends essentially being executed during the revolution. So, let's, where should we start here, actually? Oops. I think what I want to do is let's mix. What color would you say this is? Oh. Ravi says, portraits for me are way too difficult. I'm too scared to start any human faces, but I like the history, science, art information provided during these sessions. I appreciate that. Thank you, Ravi. What color? So what I'm looking at is these outlines. And I would bet you, I'm not sure, but Jacques-Louis David probably used, in fact, let's just take a device like this to project portraits and things onto the wall. So what he probably was doing is being in a very darkened room with a little pinhole or a lens on one side would allow him to have someone like Napoleon stand on the outside of this wall, and then it would be projected upside down onto the far end of the wall, allowing him to quickly trace out that image. And that way we could get a very accurate depiction of someone's likeness. Napoleon was famously very impatient and fidgety, so I'm pretty sure that David would have used this technique in order to get a portrait down as really quickly as possible. Like Napoleon probably said, okay, you got 5 minutes. Do it as much as you can. And this is literally the only time David was able to get Napoleon to pose for a portrait. David did about 5 or 6 other paintings, and 3 of them are versions of Napoleon crossing the Alps. He did, so at least maybe 5 or 6 different portraits of Napoleon, but this is the only one he did from life. Now, Napoleon visited David's studio many times and looked at the work and was very pleased with it, but this is the only time that David was able to draw or paint him from life. So the reason why I'm saying all of that is that all of these lines here, these, I think, are lines that he's tracing from the projection of Napoleon upside down onto this canvas, and he's doing it really, really quickly, and that's why we see there's barely any detail, and he's even shifting these arms up a little bit. Or this might have been done afterwards, because that process also includes a little bit of distortion. And then he probably traced it really quickly, and then very frantically tried to paint. Now, this would have taken him a little bit longer, but I bet you he got a little bit of this done in that short amount of time before Napoleon said, okay, that's it, I'm out, I gotta go. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I think I've got enough. Hopefully. We'll see if when I'm finished this painting, it still looks like him. So, what color do we want to put down here? I mean, I see a little bit of green. Let's do a bit of a greenish color. I just don't know if a green's gonna look that great on here. I mean, I am gonna do a bit of a purple. Some purple outlines. Let's do a bit of green. I mean, I guess that's what we kind of see there. So let's take our cool yellow and our cool blue. We'll mix this up. And then I'm also going to take a little bit of warm red in here. And just to kind of dilute this green, turn it into a bit more of a racing green. Now, obviously, if I add more red into this, we're just going to get a gray. So I'm just going to do that. That might be the extent of the brightness of this green that I'm going to paint with initially. So So let's do that. Let's grab a brush. Okay. So how about let's see, can you see? Pretty hard to see, but that's okay. So what I want to do is I'm just going to trace around these lines. Actually, I'm going to save a little bit for some purple here. So let's go down. All right, this is the edge of my canvas, and this is the edge of the painting. So I wonder if this... It's not clear as to what is what in this image. We'll do the outlines of all of this first, and then I'll blow dry it, and then we'll... This is probably, like, I imagine if he was painting this, he was doing this very quickly, desperately just trying to get the basics on. Because probably what he would have done is once he got some of these lines, he would just get the face in, and then he'd find somebody else to pose, to dress up as Napoleon and pose for the rest of the body. So he would just get the basic, okay, this is where the body is. Now we'll just find someone who will stand in that same position, and I'll study their body in place of Napoleon's body. So your guess is as good as mine as to what we're seeing in here. And so then I'm just going to use this same paint just to paint in the details of the face. So let's get this color very delicately. Almost done these initial outlines. I'm just doing very, very rough. Okay, so let's just zoom out and see how what we've got so far. I mean, I don't mind that green. Maybe, well, we'll see. I mean, who knows? We're going to paint some purple over top of a bunch of these as we go a little bit, so it doesn't have to be perfect anyway. Okay. There's Amy says, "You've got this one, Ravi." You know, if after we've got the portrait in here, you decide, yeah, I don't know about that green, maybe a magenta would have worked. That could also would be kind of nice. You could use that. I could paint over all of these lines. So I think it's time for a sip of tea. Yeah, Ravi, you should take some inspiration from Paula, who says, "Hi, Lolly, Ravi, I love to do portraits." Paula is fearless about trying different things. So that's why I love having you here, Paula. It's because you just launch right in and you just paint along. And what's really exciting is that you get better and better and better the more and more you take those risks and just dive right into the paintings. Okay, so let's what should we do next? Okay, I think what I want to do is I want to mix a big batch of my darkest color. So let's just take a big thing of cool blue. Let's take a big thing of warm red. In fact, let's just scoop that in here. And a big aspect of cool yellow. And we just mix all this together right where the green was, because those colors, all these colors are right in here anyway. Now this is probably a lot closer to what we could or probably should have painted instead of the green in retrospect, because this is probably closer to what he actually did. What we're looking at on the screen is probably less actually green and just the digital artifact of this image being processed probably a few times. So we need a little bit more. That color is like a really burgundy red, purpley color, which is fine, but I think we want something that's a little bit more gray and black. And so if we're trying to mix a gray and it looks very brown or purple, then that probably tells us we got a lot of red and we need to put more blue in it. And if it starts to look too purpley, we got a lot of red, then we just add a little bit more cool yellow in it, and it's gonna take it right into the purple zone. Okay. That's one color. And then next, I think I'm going to make a flesh tone, Caucasian flesh tone here. So just need a bit more warm red. Where should we do this? So we're going to use a bunch of warm yellow. Let's take a bit of warm red. This nice orange, bright orange. Let's take a bit of warm blue. So what we're getting here is a very light light brown. That's perfect. I mean, in this painting there's going to be a little bit of this color in there anyway. So I'm just going to take my white and let's maybe mix this over here to make our flesh tone. That's not bad. I think it needs just a bit more warmth. A bit more, slightly more pinkish. A little bit more yellow. Okay. So I should mention what I'm looking for. I'm trying to mix kind of this color here. All right. So we'll see how it reacts on here. Let's so mostly I'm just going to paint this color all over. It's a little bit, I probably could have put a bit more white in there. It's a little on the darker side, but that's okay. A little bit more yellowy than I wanted. Okay. That's right, Lolly says I'm finding it difficult to trace this outline, but practice makes perfect, right? And I'm taking a bit of inspiration from you, Paula, to be honest. If you can do every painting so well without an outline, at least I can do is try. That's great. That's why I love, you know, when we have each other encouraging each other. That's what, you know, we all want when we're in art classes, right? Is each one pushing each other, encouraging one another. Okay, I might even try to get a little bit of the white of these eyes right here. So I'm going to take my white, get a bit of gray. So I just took my darkest color. Painting in those eyes. Okay. Now we're going to do a bunch of little bits of glazing and things as well. Ooh, I just got to turn my heater on. I'm getting a little chilly in my toes here. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do next is I want a bit of a purple color. Maybe let's zoom out for a moment. I'm going to take my cool, let's mix this over here. Take our cool red and our warm blue. We're going to get a really intense purple, right? I'll probably be using a color similar to this, especially in the jacket and for outlines later on. I'll be using this color here, but we can take it and kind of modify it a little bit into this color, right? So we're gonna have a bit of this color in the face, we're just kind of muting it a little bit, and then we're also going to glaze with it a little bit. So I'm going to take my satin glazing liquid. All right, put a bit of it there. Mix that up. And maybe even do a little bit. So we have a few different kind of mixtures. Take a bigger brush and let's just put this color in. And I'll use another larger brush just to do any kind of blending. Underneath that nose a little bit. That chin a bit. Okay, that's a good start. So I'm going to blow dry that. Right, so we've got a good little start here. Let's keep on going. So let's get this and let it get a little bit more intense color, a little bit less flesh tone. It's a bit more on the darker purpley side of things. Also put more glazing fluid in there, both to make it more transparent, but also so it blends very easily. And then we'll just continue along here, just darkening things. Cheekbones there. You know what? Let's take some of this brown that we made earlier. Just gonna mix this right into our purple. So I just took the orange that I had initially made for the face before I added white to it and just mixed it right into that purple. So we got a kind of a purplish brown. Okay, now obviously this brown is much darker at the moment. It's gonna, he almost gives him a bit of like a slightly grayish hair by the time he's done here. Let's take a bit of this color. Okay, I think actually let's blow dry all that because I got a bunch of wet paint. I want to continue glazing over all of this. Yeah, let's just, might as well just clean those brushes. Let's just clean them right now, actually. So Lolly says, my Napoleon looks like he's just been for some in a banana yogurt or something. His skin tone's a bit yellow. I'm terrible at this. We all have to begin somewhere. You can see there's some yellow in this skin tone here. A lot of it's going to get covered up as we go. But you know, if we find your skin tone is a little bit yellow, then you probably just want to add either a little bit more red, which will make it a little bit more peachy, right? A little bit more white to also make it, give it a little bit more peachy. And sometimes people forget to add a little bit of blue because otherwise you're just going to have a very orangey face. We want a bit of a brownish face, right? Very slightly brown. And even if you get the whole thing done and it still looks yellow, we can do a very subtle wash to get rid of some of that yellowness if you feel that it's too strong. So just keep on going. Don't worry. Don't give up hope. Okay, so what should we do next here? Let's keep on going, getting darker here. So let's take this purple. Maybe let's get a bit more of the darker purple in here. So I just took, again, a little bit of this color that I had mixed, which is just cool red and warm blue. I'm just adding a little bit of it into here. I'm also going to come back and brighten up underneath these eyes as well. Or underneath the eyebrows and bring that back. So I'm looking for his cheekbone here. All right. I think I should put these lips in before I go too much further. So let's take some warm red. It's going to take a little bit of glazing fluid. And you can see this warm red is maybe a little bit diluted. I'm adding a little bit of glazing fluid, just so it's not full strength. Rouge on his face there. Should probably blow dry this before doing too much more. That's okay. I'm going to put a little bit of that same red I'm going to blow dry this because I'm going to start smudging paint, pulling paint off. Okay, so let's just take, while I've got this warm red that I've been painting with for a few moments here, let's just take it, get a bit on the cheeks here. into these lips. Obviously, you know, when you're painting a male figure, you don't want to overdo it with red lips, otherwise the figure will look more and more feminine. But we all have lips, right? And if we don't do them, then the person will look kind of strange without it. Bit more glazing fluid on here. Okay, what should we do now? I think let's do the eyes. I'll take my dark color. Now I'm going to take a bit of glazing fluid, put it side on its own there. Let's take some of our dark color and just mix it into here. And actually, you know, I should probably blow dry it. But this, I'm going to use this for doing a little bit of outlining here. Okay, so I'm taking this glazing fluid with my darkest color, right, that was made with cool blue, cool yellow, and warm red. So I'm going to shape these eyelids here in a moment. They're the top parts of the eyelids. I'm going to actually add some lighter color back into here. But right now I'm both painting on the eyelid and also painting on the eyeball itself to get a bit more of a gray color. See there? That gives the eyeball a little bit of dimension. fact, let's do that eyelid stuff right now. Let's get, let's put a bit of glazing fluid in here. So we want something that's a little bit transparent, but not super transparent. Let's get a bit more. Just a little bit of that. Let's go back to our dark color again. Gotta kind of shaping these eyelids is a little bit tricky. And we're painting on a very small surface here. Right, I'm all the way zoomed in on my camera, so I could understand if somebody wanted to use a larger canvas or blow this up onto a larger, or just blow this central thing up onto something larger so they don't have to try to do such tiny detail work. Okay, and on these lips, it's the top lip is the darker lip because it's getting the shadow. All of this is keeps getting darker and darker and darker as we go here. Give just a tiny bit of white reflection in these eyes. Just taking some white. So let's tackle the hair again, because we haven't done that in a while. So I'm going to use this same purple that we have down here that we've been using on the face. I'm going to take a bit of white. Actually, you know what? Maybe let's just do this separately, just so we don't confusing. Let's take some of this white. Let's take our black. So we're basically making a gray. And I'm also going to take a bit of, I guess I might have to mix a bit more of it. Purple, which is my warm blue and cold red. And bring it back over here. Where should we start? What's sort of fascinating to me about Jacques-Louis David is he had seen, he had painted so many different people who at one point seemed like on the rise to political fame, and that were, you know, appeared to be, you know, the hot young star politician, and then seen within months them fall and be imprisoned and executed, and so he probably had similar feelings. You know, he's probably making this painting of Napoleon going like, you know, in 5 years, you could be the leader of this country, or you could be in a shallow grave, an unmarked grave somewhere with buried without your own head. Like, it'll be interesting to see what happens to you, Mr. Bonaparte. And I think while we might... It's pretty easy to criticize someone like Jacques-Louis David and be like, wow, like what a you know, ruthless personality. But we don't have any idea, like, what it would have been like to have been alive at that time. Like, the fact that he survived the French Revolution while he was in the very center of it and was friends with all of the main personalities on different sides at different times is absolutely remarkable. Like, that he wasn't himself executed is, like, blows my mind. Smudge this out a bit, blend it out. Let's just take this same color. We'll just add a little bit more of our dark color. In fact, let's add just a bit more. Speed this along. Looks like I might have to go much darker. So he probably wouldn't have done too much more to a portrait like this until he got more of the painting done. So he probably would have been like, okay, I got Napoleon's face on here. Now let's kind of move on to the background. We'll paint that for a while. And then when the treaty with Austria collapsed, he was probably like, well, okay, I'm glad I didn't work any longer on that one. Zoom back out. So we can assess how things are going so far. I mean, I'll probably do a little bit more glazing, just darken on the face, but I'm not too unhappy with how that looks at this exact moment, right? I mean, we've been zoomed in pretty tight for a while, and when you're zoomed in pretty tight, it's not usually the most flattering okay. So maybe now what I want to do is I'm going to take my purple. I'm just going to glaze a little bit with it. I'm going to paint over top of some of my green lines, not all of them, but this is just going to give it the effect that also he's kind of searching to make the painting a little bit more accurate. That he's looked at it and gone like, you know what, now that I got those lines down, gotta say, it actually, I'm very pleasantly surprised at how well this purple and the green are mixing together on the canvas here. It's exactly what this painting needed. It really kind of captures the look of what we see in the photograph there on the left, because there is some green in it and there's also some purples in it. So for anyone who thinks it's like not ethically sound, not ethically, morally right to use templates and to trace images, because artists, I hear that all the time. Isn't that cheating to do that? Like, only the best artists, you know, only like the best artists would never do that. Like, it's only hacks who use a projector or tracing paper. In reality, every artist, especially around this time, was exploring lenses and different devices in order to get a better image on the canvas. And you know, we're all aware that there's biases that people have, but artists were very secretive, and they often would tell people that they eyeballed it, even though in their studio they were actually using whatever device they could to get a better painting. Chat's gone pretty quiet. That usually means everyone is painting furiously along, which is good. I'm curious how many people are actually making this painting or who are working on something completely different. Well, he says, I'm working on this one, and I can confidently say that I now dislike Napoleon very much. That's pretty funny. That is pretty funny. Okay, so let's do his lip. Actually, I'm going to blow dry this because I got all this wet paint here. So let's just do that so I don't smudge anything. You know what? Maybe I'm gonna go to my red first. I could, yeah, let's do the red, and then we'll do the purple, and then we'll do the blue. So this red, I'm even add just a tad of white in here. Now remember that, you know, when we layer red over green or blue, it tends to almost look like a black, dark brown. So we can paint it right over there, and it almost gives it a bit of an outline. So I'm going to take this red, and there's some glazing fluid, and just put that underneath. Take some white and purple. Just glaze a little bit with that. Oh! Hi, kiddos! Sure. Just want to get a little bit of this.
What Daddy's doing. Oh my gosh. He loves the washing machine. The dryer.
This little purple scarf.
What's Daddy doing? What's Daddy doing?
I'm just gonna move this out of the way because our daughter wants to say hello.
everybody.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Look how tall you are. You're going to hit your head on the ceiling soon. Yeah, you can see yourself on the TV there, hey? That's you.
Say happy
Yeah.
New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Happy New Year, everybody. Yeah.
Show everyone your little Mulan. Your little Mulan figure.
Your little dolly? Got lots of toys. Lots of toys, kiddo.
Too many toys for Christmas.
Yeah. Okay.
We just wanted to say hi. Bye, Daddy.
Love you,
Love
girls.
you.
Aww. Oh, I'm so blessed. So I'm just... Actually, I should probably blow dry that. I'm gonna hop in the dryer, go for a spin. Okay. So I'm just gonna take, let's just take this purple here.
Say bye, Daddy. I love you.
Bye, kiddo.
Holidays, everybody.
Okay. Thanks for indulging me there. Just gonna take, so this is my purple from before. It's got a bit of glazing fluids. It's not super dark. So we can paint with it and then shape it. So these kind of like folds in this scarf. I'll even take this purple and paint over top of this red here. Okay. Let's do this. I'm going to just paint with this. Actually, let's go a little bit darker. We'll just add a little bit more of the blue purple. how far down are we going? So that's the top of the finger here. So basically we're going to come down quite far. We can see how he brushed this in. Now that looks like it was called like a Prussian blue. It's a very dark blue. We'll mix a bit of it here shortly, but and we'll paint that into the collar there. Let's zoom back out. Okay. I'm gonna blow dry that again. You know, I'm gonna take this same line. I like the green, but I also really like how the purple's modulating it. I'm just gonna delicately put it over top of this green here. Okay, yeah, let's blow dry that. Okay, let's take our dark color. I'm gonna bring this into the purple and warm blue. And it's probably not super visible, but what we've got now is very close to what is considered like the Prussian blue. It's mostly what I've got here is warm blue, and then the dark color create that really nice, distinct kind of super navy blue. Lolly's gonna give up on her unfinished painting. That's okay, because that's exactly what Jacques-Louis David did, right? At some point he also just abandoned his version of the painting. Let's get Okay, just smudged a little bit of paint with my fingers. Let's just clean that up. Now I might glaze a little bit with this paint. So we've used like all the colors here. We haven't left any colors out, you know, which is always, I think, important for people to see. I'm just darkening over top of some of this purple. I think I really like the look it has, so I'm not going to darken too much more beyond that, I think. Where's this paint coming from? Now, I guess what I'm thinking to myself is, do I want to darken the cheek and all the side of the face? Maybe just a little bit. I don't know. I think I could be pretty close to being done here. Yay, drop in the pen, brush on the canvas, just before you're done making me sweat. Ooh, okay, there's just a tiny little places I want to touch up. Here there's a little bit of paint that I missed earlier, so as that dries, I want to continue darkening that face. Let me think about it. Let's blow dry. I might just take a bit of this glaze. blow dry that. Maybe just a little bit more glaze. Just slightly darkening in on the whites of those eyes. A little bit underneath the nose. Ah, okay. Thanks for the note about being muted there, Lolly. Appreciate it. I guess that collar, as I look at it, maybe we could put... Okay, I think that's good. I think I'm happy with that. What does it look like up close again? Yeah. Okay. If you enjoyed today's episode, please strongly consider liking, subscribing to the channel, hit that notification bell, especially as we go into the new year, because I have no idea when and I'm doing what episode yet. Everything's I was up late last night doing lots of planning, but you never quite know. Jacques-Louis David. That's fun. I'm so glad I did that. I've thought about this painting hundreds of times. To actually go and try to paint it is super, super satisfying. Okay, everyone. If you want to support the channel, there's a PayPal link in the description below. You can always leave a small donation, as little as $1. If you want to do an e-transfer or send a check or whatever, contact me through the Facebook group or through my website. The links are all in the description below. On Thursday, we're going to be painting a Cynthia St. James 2 paintings for Kwanzaa, which is already in full motion right now. So if you want to join us and talk a little bit about Kwanzaa, learn a little bit about Kwanzaa, join us on Thursday. We're going to be making that painting, and then on New Year's Eve we're going to be painting a Caspar David Friedrich painting, and I'm super excited about that one. The Wanderer in the Sea of Fog is one of the great paintings in art history, and that will close out 2021. So we'll see you guys in a couple of days. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and it's freezing cold here in Vancouver, so hopefully everyone stays nice and warm. We'll see you guys in just a couple of days. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks again.